everyone. My name is Jesse Chason with Lisa Blanchard as the host of Airing Addiction.
I share often my journey started on this campus. Got sober as a client here, just like you.
I really do see phenomenal change.
Always hope. I've seen situations that on the surface look impossible become possible.
Doing this podcast is to share those recovery stories, be honest about what the challenges are and have some real conversations, but kind of share that out on the airwaves.
Welcome everybody to today's episode of Airing Addiction. If you're listening live or close to it, today's September 22nd, which means we are solidly in the middle of Recovery Month. And so as you might have heard Jesse and I say, we are trying to do more episodes this month to really recognize and celebrate recovery in all the ways that we can. And so that's part of why I'm really excited about our guest today. So you might notice I don't have Jesse. Jesse had a, urgent personal matter. So I'm going to handle this conversation kind of on my own. We'll miss Jesse. Jesse will be back in our next episode. But I'm really excited today to welcome Michelle Simons. So Michelle is a person in long-term recovery since December 2000 and has worked in the addiction field for the past 19 years. She has her master's of counseling psychology from Salem State and teaches in the Recovery Coach Academy. And I'm really excited about talking a little bit about Recovery Coach Academy and recovery coaching, as well as several addiction counseling courses at the North Shore Community College. She works as both a clinical and a non-clinical recovery coach supervisor for several agencies. And I also want to talk a little bit about recovery pathways. So I'm really excited to share that Michelle's, path of recovery involves practicing and teaching. I'm going to probably pronounce this wrong, Sahaja Yoga.
You did.
And has a large network of fellow meditators, which I love, and mentors that she leans on all over the world. And so we'll let Michelle tell her recovery story and her recovery pathway and her current work, and we'll have a fantastic conversation today to really celebrate Recovery Month. So with that, Michelle, welcome.
Thank you so much, Lisa. It's really good to be here. It's fun that you guys picked today as the day to do this podcast, because today is my 50th birthday. So I'm like adjusting a little bit, like, wow, half a century. But yeah, I'm happy to.
Milestone. You had said it was your birthday, and I was going to sneak that in somewhere in the podcast. But that's amazing.
I know. I blurted it out. I ruined your moment.
I love it. It's your day, not mine.
Thanks. Yeah. So, I'm so passionate about recovery. I love it. I teach in the Recovery Coach Academy, and being, like kind of a William White fan, who's in my mind sort of the guru of recovery coaching. He says there's so much research done on disease and the disease of addiction and disorders, and there's hardly any research done on recovery. So the reason why I'm so passionate about this recovery coaching is like, oh, they're finally listening to us, and I got my degree so they would listen to me a little bit more. And that always helps. But I do feel like this lived experience is so important to support and help folks share that hope and know that it's possible, especially when, somebody like me was in situations where I didn't quite know whether I was ever going to get out of it. So my active addiction, my drugs of choice were heroin and crystal meth. I was an IV drug user. I lived for quite a few years on the street. I grew up in a town called Swampscott. We're a little bit north of Boston. I now live in Lynn. But when I graduated high school, I went to a year of college, failed out miserably. And I had way too much fun. And eventually moved out onto the West Coast and ended up in San Francisco, where most of my active addiction occurred. So I maintained and functioned as a human being and got to use drugs and party like I, wanted to for a period of time. And at some point that shifted. And my family's here back in Mass. And as time went on, like quite a few years into this, they noticed something was wrong, realized something was wrong. And I would come back to Boston on occasion and go through treatment here in Mass. So it's funny, we were talking a little bit before we got on here, and my first detox was actually Spectrum in Westboro. I knew it was one of the W names. so Spectrum in Westboro. And so that first detox, I had no idea what I was getting into. People explained, oh, it's like a hospital and you go and, they'll safely like take you. I don't even know what they said to me. I don't even know what I thought, but I knew I was going to get off heroin and I knew I couldn't do it on my own. And I remember landing at Logan Airport from San Francisco and being driven straight to this detox. Like there was no stops. And, I landed there and I have like pretty good memories of it. That was probably like 1998 or something like that. And like like you said in the beginning, I got into recovery in December of 2000, the end of 2000. My date is like the day after Christmas, only because it's a little fuzzy and I don't know the exact number, right, of like when I stopped like taking some, whatever I was finding in the medicine cabinet after my detox. So you can pretty much picture what the active addiction looks like. It looked like most people's, or most people that end up IV drug use. Usually we end up homeless and on the streets. And in San Francisco, it's a lot easier to live on the streets than it is here in Boston. So when you say on the streets, you really mean on the streets, like not in people's houses or in shelters. And that was okay with me for like a long period of time, because any money or anything that I came up with could go towards drugs. And that's all I wanted to do. And anything that came between that, I resisted or fought. Right. So it's like, I try and never forget where I came from when I work with folks, because I know that like it feels so threatening to feel like somebody's going to like stop you from doing the one thing that you like to do or think you like to do, or that's, giving you some kind of comfort or whatever, whatever the feeling it is that's giving you. And at some point, especially with something like heroin and opioids, like you need it to stay well. And the idea of getting sick and going through treatment and, like having to go through withdrawal is horrifying, so anything that, sort of threatens like, oh my God, I might get sick, freaks us out too. So I ran for a long time from all the help. I definitely received help from these outreach folks, like the harm reduction folks that were out in the streets in San Francisco, handing out sandwiches and clean works and all that kind of stuff, probably disease free because of them. So that was awesome. Whenever people, fight against that concept, I always say like, it's probably pretty good chance that that's why I'm disease free. So I'm grateful for these folks that are willing to go out there in the streets and like, go to risky places and, come help people like us. I always had an open door to recovery. Like throughout my entire active addiction, there was always opportunities to go to treatment, to get help. So there was an element of choice that I was like, no, I don't want that. But there was also, what I didn't see is the grip of the disease of addiction that was on me, having me make choices against my own spirit. When I got into recovery, I went through the detox. I went to an outpatient program saying like, oh, residentials don't work for me. And I remember towards the end of the outpatient program getting honest for the first time in my life. I remember telling the woman who was running this group, I don't think I'm going to make it. Like, I want to get high. I'm plotting and planning how I'm going to get back to San Francisco, because that's where my running peeps were, and that's where I wanted to be. And I did love that city. I still love that city. It just I just couldn't get clean there. But I remember she somehow like had that instinct and knew that like there was a real short window that Michelle was going to like make a move. So she jumped on that chance, and I saw that. And I remember telling her that. And within 5 minutes, she had me in her office on the phone, making calls to residential places to try and get me a bed. And then there was a 2-week wait. So I was like, cool, no commitments. So I wrote out like I don't know, it was a couple of days, I think. And I remember going to a 12-step meeting, and I ran into the entire program that I was supposed to be going into, that I was supposed to go into in 2 weeks. And there was a counselor who was working then at that program, and she knew me from detoxes, from my several like stints and this detox close by here on the North Shore. And she was like, Michelle, if you want a bed here at this facility, we'll see you tomorrow morning at 8:00. And I'm like, oh no, like I have things to do. Like, I don't know what I came up with.
I was supposed to have this time frame.
Yeah. I was like, wait, I have like a week to, another week of whatever I thought I was doing. And she's like, come tomorrow or you lose your bed. Thank God she did that. I don't know what I told her. I was like, I have to do laundry. Oh, no, I was telling her. But thank God she was like, tomorrow morning or you lose your bed. And I came in and I was just like, in that program, it was very strict. It was, it was January of 2001 when I checked in. And it was similar to like a therapeutic community type of program. They forced us to do everything. I needed that. By no means today do I think that those types of programs work for everybody. Over the 21 years, I've evolved into understanding and supporting all paths of recovery and all types of treatment too. However, at the time, that's exactly what worked for me. I remember feeling like sitting on the couch, like those big hard wooden couches that were in the treatment facility. They were like state facility furniture. They were so attractive. And I remember sitting on this couch and just like feeling like an empty shell. Like, this is just miserable, because now I'm looking outside and there's snow on the ground. And we were on the first floor, and I was like, I just want to jump out the window and like I remember this, but like, I just want to throw myself in the snow and just die. Like, it sounds funny now, but I was just so miserable, like just a miserable kind of bratty, like, oh, like, get me, where am I? I was like, at least when I was homeless, I had palm trees, Oh my God. I'm like remembering back the way I used to think too. Right. Mm-hmm. So I sat through that program, and they just forced us to do all the things I was afraid to do. They forced us to get help. They forced us to build a network of folks in recovery. They forced us to go to meetings, and I'm saying force, like it would be a huge snowstorm. There were women and children in the program as well. And like, if people know Lynn at all, like the program was on the commons, and, mothers pushing infants in carriages across the commons to get to meetings. And so I was a hardcore 12-step fellowship girl. I loved it. Like, after some time, I really got myself involved in it. Like, I was a really shy person, actually, surprisingly. I couldn't even read on a piece of paper comfortably in group in that program. And as time went on, I just found my ability to share myself a little bit here, a little bit there. I'd sort of tested it out, felt vulnerable and freaked out by sharing, some thoughts and feelings that happened inside. And as time went on, the confidence started to build, and I got really comfortable with myself. And I had, sponsors throughout, and worked the 12 steps vigilantly with that, and a strong sense of spirituality. I remember there was one counselor, she wasn't in recovery herself, but one counselor in the program who was like a minister at a Pentecostal church, which I never got involved in, but she had this just solid trust and faith in her spirituality. And she never pushed like the church stuff or her religion on us, but she just built an atmosphere of spirituality just by her presence. And she would talk about, she was from Barbados, and she would talk about like, I remember the green fields and the cows, and, I would just, she would just like describe nature, and that really meant something to me. And and she would say, she was like a heavy set woman, and she would say like, I love myself from like the tips of my toes to the top of my head. And I was like, I want what she has, like I never heard somebody talk like that before. So, and I knew that was like her spirituality, her God in her life that like gave her that feeling. And I strived for that all along. Fast forward, like early recovery, I started going back to school, and I felt like I'm in a place where I can like learn now, like I'm ready to start to, absorb some stuff. And I started going back to school with no intention of working in the field, because that was so cliche, right? Everybody I was in treatment was like, I'm going to be a counselor. And I'm like, we're in treatment. How are we going to help it? Like at least, I had that faculty about me. And so I went back to school at North Shore Community College, where I work now, which is nothing short of a miracle, because I was a terrible student all around, always before then, before I embarked on it in recovery. And I took like Comp 1, like Composition 1 and College Success Seminar, just to sort of, learn how to go to school again and study and all that stuff. So I used all the skills they taught me in treatment and 12-step fellowships, like sit up front, listen, share, talk, ask questions. So I used all those things. And then I just lightly mentioned to my College Success Seminar instructor that maybe I would go into their drug and alcohol program. They had like a drug and alcohol rehabilitation program, which is what I work for now, or sort of work for. I'll explain that. But so he ran me down to the director of the program, and I met him, and him and I hit it off right away. He was this older guy, very cool, laid back, like, oh, you'd be great, Michelle, come join the program. And I was like, okay, so I ended up starting to take the classes, and I loved them. There was people like me in the program, people in recovery, allies, people that, were interested in helping other folks that have, seen it in their family too. And I enjoyed all of it. So slowly but surely put myself through school. Ooh, nice thunder going on out there.
It's reaching you now.
Now we have the storm. So I put myself through school. I took my time. I didn't graduate Salem State with my master's till 2016, because I refused to take summer classes. My recovery was always like first. I don't want to be one of those people that like neglected my recovery to, go save the planet or anything like that. So it was like, I was very grounded in the fact that like, I'm not going to be good for anybody if I'm not feeling well mentally, emotionally, physically. Even if it wasn't like about relapsing or using drugs, I wanted to be emotionally stable, comfortable, and like joyful. Right? Because for me, recovery is joyful. It's not doom and gloom. It's not a struggle every day. I actually enjoy it, and that's why I love that we're doing this like Celebrate Recovery Month, because it is a celebration. I'm not saying I was never on a pink cloud ever. I don't know what that is. I was like, what is that? When people are like, oh, I'm sober. But now, no matter what's happening around me with this solid foundation of spirituality and recovery, even if stuff's chaotic around me, I just have this like comfort within myself. Like I'm at peace within most days. I'm not going to say I have my moments. We all do. But most of the time, and I also have an awareness now from doing this work that when I'm off, I know it, and I know what to do with it and who to take it to. I'm going to pull my window down because we're raining really hard. So, sounds lovely, but probably not for this platform.
Listen, it's kind of metaphoric, though, with what you're talking about. There can be storms outside, and you're fine where you're.
We're okay. It's beautiful. Yeah. So, where I am today, I'll talk about the Sahaja Yoga, which is to me now the most important thing that I do. 15 years of recovery and 12-step work. I got to a place where I was 42 years old, and like I started to have like weird stomach, like I'd have acid reflux, just weird like stomach things that happen to all of us because we ate processed food all our life or something like that. Whatever the problem is, I don't know, but everybody seems to have these issues. But and that was causing a lot of anxiety, and I couldn't figure out what was going on, and I didn't want to like get on planes anymore. I was get anxious about, you know, traveling and things like that because I didn't want to not feel good and not be home and, you know, all that kind of stuff. So I wasn't gonna accept it in a sense. Like I've been taken care of so well by my higher power. Like there was no question about like that happening and very alive and well in my life. And so when I hit 15 years, I just remember being like, what is going on? Like, I don't believe I was taken this far to be sort of like dropped in like this like muck of anxiety and, you know, whatever it is. And I enjoy life. Like I still did. So I was like, I didn't get it. So I asked around the fellowships. I was like, you know, what do you guys do? Have you been hit with anxiety? Like, I think, you know, 15 years into recovery, tons of work on myself, you know, invested in my spirituality. And people were, you know, I got a couple of answers that were not satisfactory. Like somebody said like, oh, you know, like I'm just paranoid now. I can't drive over bridges. I have phobias and I just accepted them. And I'm like, no, I don't want to accept this. So I didn't accept it. I kept seeking. And I remember looking on the wall of one of the 12-step meetings that I was at, and I was looking at the list of the steps, and I saw the 11th step, which is like prayer and meditation, and I never meditated. I probably tried. I might have set the timer on my phone for like 5 minutes and sat there. That was about the extent of it. I always prayed. I grew up Jewish, and they taught us how to talk Hebrew, so I didn't really get the whole prayer thing until I came into recovery. So, you know, prayer for me was never religious based, but it did like involve getting on my knees and humbly, you know, in a sense, like being in awe of God or my higher power and just being like, please help me stay away from a drink, a drug, and like added a cigarette later on to that prayer and asked him like, you know, help me be of service or best carry out your will. And I did that all along. And I thought, you know, like to a point that was sufficient. And at some point it wasn't anymore and I needed more. And so the meditation, I started Googling meditation. I when I saw that on the wall, like that was like a sign for me, like, this is what you need. And I didn't at the time. Now it's very popular and, you know, it's everywhere and there's tons of apps. And back then it was gaining some traction, but not as much as it is today. And so I sought outside the fellowships for some meditation guidance, and I found a couple of things that cost a lot of money, and I was really like disheartened because I remember calling one place and they were like, it's $1,500 for life. You can have a lifetime membership. And I'm like, what? My friend Richard, he says like, yeah, like, you know, you don't pay to watch a tree grow. So like, you shouldn't have to pay for your spirituality, you know? And it's like, exactly. So, so I found this Sahaja Yoga. Unbeknownst to me, it just said like, you know, the town Salem, which is down the street from me here in Lynn. It said Salem meditates. Found Sahaja Yoga, which means spontaneous union. Yoga means union, and Sahaja means spontaneous or born with. So we all have this ability or this energy within to feel at one or be at union with our higher power or God, Mother Nature, whatever you want to call it. The woman was from Maharashtra, India, that was teaching. And, you know, immediately, like I felt the depth of her spirituality, and her and I became really close friends. I was like, teach me everything about this. And she invited me to her house and meditated with her whole family, and the kids meditated. And then I met this huge, Sahaja Yoga is worldwide. It's always free. So probably never hear of it because we have no money and we don't advertise much. You know, we're not commercialized. You can't go out and pay like $600 and become a Sahaja Yoga master, right? So, which is all the things that I appreciate, right? Because that's how I feel, you know, innately I knew spirituality should not cost money. And so yeah, I'm like fully invested in this Sahaja Yoga lifestyle. I love it. I practice.
That was a good one.
Thank you. I practice every day, and the network of people is fascinating. Like there are people that never smoked or drank or anything in their life. I mean, not people like me that came in later in life have a different experience, but some people were born, practicing, and it's such a strong support network of like spiritual mentors that I have around me. Like sometimes I'm the mentor and sometimes I'm the mentee, right? And so that I'm ever so grateful. Like I sought something out, and and I ended up at the right place at the right time, and was able to find it, and seriously grateful for that, because all that anxiety gone. Like it's fascinating. Like I don't live with that anymore, and I truly believe that we don't have to in life. So that alone, I'm not going to say I don't get nervous, like for things and stuff, but not like that. Where
that's so fantastic. So I just want to say something about that, because what I wrote it down as you were talking, that I do a lot of mindfulness meditation, kind of traditional, kind of, Eastern comes to Western, kind of classic, mindfulness meditation. But one of the things that, especially with everything going on in the world right now, that has really been part of the conversation is that kind of allowing yourself to be there and having that awareness in the present doesn't mean you just accept everything as it is. You can accept this moment, right? But it allows you to be centered enough to do something about it, right? To actually be in a centered enough place to mobilize change, right? And I do think that if so many of us really, in whatever ways we find, right, and I'm totally going to look up a lot of this Sahaja Yoga information after we finish this podcast. I hope others do too. But whichever pathway you find to kind of, whether it's your spirituality, your mindfulness meditation, anything like that brings you, into the present moment, right? If we all did that more, I really think it would have a huge ripple effect, right? Not just in our individual lives, but in the community in general. And I just think that's so awesome. I want to dive into recovery coaching in a minute, but I want to just reflect on your story, if you don't mind me doing that, Michelle, is that, I actually just, this is me, like the clinical hat on. I was just working on a group curriculum that I was revising for our entire spectrum, programs. And we have kind of harm reduction. So you talked a lot about harm reduction, how important that is. But I actually just literally yesterday finished drafting a group called Recovery Pathways. And I really reference the 8 dimensions of wellness that SAMHSA puts out. And honestly, I feel like you described all 8, right, in your story, but it's your pathway, right? The way that you chose and made choices across your recovery journey, right, to develop your own recovery pathway was your own, right? And one is not, the same as someone else's. But really, I just kind of quickly jotted down as you were talking, all of the treatment, that's a piece of it, right? Treatment is part of that, but it's not all of it, right? So like you talked about kind of, detox at Spectrum too, that always makes me smile. Outpatient, residential, right? Having all of those kind of levels of care in your journey. But you also talked about kind of course, 12-step fellowship, right? And how sponsors and mentors support you, and that spirituality and that community, and that's in school. And like, I really think like it just in you sharing your story without any kind of list to go by, you really described kind of all of those, dimensions of wellness. And so I'm really enjoying this conversation, quite a bit, because it fits in so much with what we're all here to celebrate, right, this month. And part of why I like to share in this podcast so many recovery stories, because not one is the same as someone else's. And like maybe one piece of what you share is helpful to someone listening, right? And they take that piece, and then they hear something else from someone else, and they take that piece, and they kind of develop and put together their own, kind of puzzle of what their recovery is going to look like.
Absolutely. And I really liked what you said about, how that change happens. Like there's a line with Sahaja Yoga, like if we're if we're not peaceful within, we can't have peace on the outside. So like we have to start here, right? And you just named that really well, you know, when you talked about the meditation, like if we're settled inside, then we're much more effective to make change. If I'm so angry inside and I'm like, they're doing recovery wrong, you know, or whatever it is that I'm sort of fighting for, I'm not going to be effective and I'm going to harm myself. Right. But if we are able to be peaceful inside, then that's where I noticed like things really started to shift in my life. Right. When I'm calm inside, the outside stuff starts to shift as well.
And one of the other things you said in the beginning that really kind of struck me, right, is that when you were in your active addiction, right, you were fighting against all of the interventions and supports and all of that. And that one of the things you said, and I might get the exact quote wrong because I can't even read my own handwriting because I was kind of taking notes so well. But, you know, you said you were kind of, you know, making choices against your own spirit. Mm-hmm. Right? And then the closer you got to recovery, I could just so clearly hear you starting to make choices with your spirit, right? Even that choice to show up at that residential at 8 a.m, even though that is not what you wanted to do. You wanted another week to do whatever it is you were doing, right? Yeah. But you were like, all right, well, I'm just going to show up, right? And then take it from there. That was like one of those first choices that went probably with your spirit. And some of the other things that you said really struck me about that too. And I think leads into this conversation of how do we support recovery coaches and elevate that role and take care of people, is that you really describe so clearly, even in your school process, right? Because I see that, right, in lots of areas, not just with individuals in long-term recovery, but with people in general, is that they're so goal and focus driven that they just go without pausing and without recognizing what they need, right? So things like taking the long road through school, you know, refusing to go to school in the summer. That's amazing. Who would do? It's beautiful out, right? Like you lived in San Francisco, and in New England, that's the closest we get is the summer, right? And we can, you know, enjoy that. And just that awareness around, you said you're not good for anybody, right? If you're not kind of well and stable and joyful. And so I wonder if that's a good connection to some of the work that you're doing as a recovery coach supervisor and in the Recovery Coach Academy to talk about how do we support others in recovery in these, you know, kind of newer roles. Mm-hmm.
Definitely. You said the 8 dimensions of wellness. We use I have something, the 7 dimensions of wellness, same gig, right? Yes. So I utilize that in our Recovery Coach Academy, actually both part 1 and part 2. So like the core training and I love it. I love it. I'll give you the Sahaja Yoga twist, and then I'll give you the Recovery Coach Academy twist, because I have to be, you know, it's a little fine line to walk. But, you know, one of my, you know, close friends in Sahaja Yoga, he told me one day, he was saying that he was sharing, you know, some of his coworkers. He works in tech, and of course that's like a high stress. They kill you in some of those jobs, and there's no wellness there. You know, they try and pretend they, you know, incorporate it in, and I don't think they really do, but or model it. Yeah. So somebody was, you know, you seem so calm all the time. You seem, you know, like joyful. How, you know, what do you do? He's like, I meditate, and he's like, you know, it's all about, he said something about balance, right? So we always hear this work-life balance or family home balance. So he said, you can list all these things like family, work, you know, all our responsibilities, this, that, the other, whatever it is, right? And he wrote spirituality in there too. And like, how do you find balance, like physical, mental, spiritual, like basically those categories, right? And he's like, one thing will help balance all the others. And then he wrote like spirituality, like across them all. Basically, it like canceled everything out if you're, you know, if your foundation is on spirituality. And that's what I've found. It takes care of the rest. Otherwise, you know, and I'll share that as my personal experience with folks. But then obviously we let folks decide for themselves how, you know, but those 7 dimensions of wellness, we use it a lot because it really highlights what area might need some attention. And a lot of times, you know, folks are like, if you go to school, then like I'm neglecting my children, or if I'm like, I'm working so much, I can't write my all these things. And I'm not goal driven. I hate goals. I shouldn't say hate, that's a strong word. But when we talk about goals, sometimes we do have to teach some of those goals stuff with when we talk about wellness plans and stuff with recovery coaching. But to me, they're very limiting, and they're heady, and anything heady gives me a headache. Like, it's like, do I do physical exercise and run? Yeah. People are always like, what are you training for? I'm like, life. Like, I don't know.
I love that.
Not a marathon, because I did that once and it was awful. So I'll never do it again. But, I just do it so I can eat pizza on Fridays and have an ice cream and stuff and like snacks. And, so all the things that I do, it's, mainly because I enjoy them, or, they help me grow. And, I feel like that's a lifelong thing till the day I die. I'm going to be learning and growing, and mainly about myself. The more I learn about me, the more I understand you. Right? Because we are one and the same, really. As far as our experiences are all different, but we all have the same range of feelings. So I feel like we're no different. So the more I start to understand myself and how I tick, the better I can assist others.
That's so fantastic. So, one of the things I wanted to talk a little bit about before we, towards the end of this podcast is that like that peer support and recovery coach role. And one of the things you said in the very beginning really struck me. And I feel that strongly too, right? Like, I'm a clinician. I've been a clinician for many years, right? Like, that's my leadership role. That's my clinical role, right? But I believe really strongly that I can help people to a point, right? I can be absolutely part of that conversation, but I can't support somebody from a place of lived experience like a recovery coach can, right? Like a sponsor can, like all these different roles that are very different from each other, right? But I can't do that, right? And that is something that really, I think, is probably the most powerful to give hope and support, from that place of lived experience. And so can you talk a little bit about the value of that in supporting individuals working towards or, in long-term recovery?
Absolutely. I mean, even as a clinician, before I embarked on the recovery coaching stuff, because I kind of went that route, right? Because recovery coaching really wasn't a thing when I started my clinical training. I will just say that despite all the clinical training and the recovery coach training, I'm still having the same conversations I was having early on, right? They just are a little more skilled, and I know myself better now, right? But the lived experience, so like as putting myself back, like when I was doing more clinical work and I would be doing an intake with somebody from the residential program down the street, and I'd be doing an outpatient type intake. And this is the first time this person's sitting in front of me. They're less than, or maybe just 2 weeks into their program. They used to come to us and have to come to outpatient therapy. And, it's like so tense. It's awful. Like I hate asking personal questions to folks that it just feels so unfair, right? Like, I'm asking you these like traumatic questions about your past. And, why do I deserve to know this right now? Or why do we bring this, that kind of stuff. So I understand the clinical side of it and the reasoning behind it. On the other side, the human side of me is like, I don't like this. So after some time, I'd say, listen, I know these are hard. We just have to get through this. I was in your shoes. I would full disclose as a clinician, it probably wasn't the right way to, it wasn't how I was trained, but I did it anyway. Most people knew me anyway, because I lived and worked and recovered in the same community in Lynn here. So I was like, I actually sat in on those couches in Project Hope, where you are. And, I get it. And you would just see the sigh of relief. Really? And I'm like, yeah, really. So I get it. I get how miserable you probably feel. Right. So those are the things, is tapping into and remembering dying doesn't scare us. So I can be detached when I work with folks, right? So I know that, like, I don't get to people and say, doesn't it scare you with all the fentanyl today? No, no. And I know it never scared me. In fact, that sometimes seemed like the only way out, right? So, like, dying doesn't scare us. It's sad when people die, and, like, people don't want to lose their friends. And I think that scares people, but they don't care if they die a lot of times, and neither did I at the time, so I can talk to people like that in a detached sort of way, where I'm not like, don't you want to live? Because, like, sometimes people don't. So I know what I tapped into, what got, I remember one time somebody said something like, go to that, like, 0.000, like 1% of yourself that has a little bit of, like, inkling to get into recovery, and see if you can build on that. Right. So that spoke to me. I don't think I got into recovery when I heard that, but I learned to tap into that later on. I think when I was, early on struggling, trying to stay and that kind of thing.
And that understanding, one of the things you said really early on that also struck me, that I don't think that, either sometimes treatment providers, right? Like, yeah. Family members, of course, right? Because they're so scared and worried, and they don't understand if they haven't been in those shoes, right? Is that how, like, one of the things you said specifically is how much treatment was actually threatening, right? It was threatening the things that were supporting you day to day, right? Supporting, managing those withdrawal symptoms, getting by kind of day to day. And I think one of the things that we need to recognize is that it's okay to talk about those things, right? Like, I do a ton of education all day, every day, right? In all kinds of settings about fentanyl, right? Because people need to know that, right? Like, our patients need to know that, our residents need to know that, our families, like, they need to know, right? That there's what the risks are. But it's also okay to talk about kind of the why are we still doing this? Like, why is that? And to recognize that there are good things about it, even if they're not the best things, but they're the things that are keeping somebody moving from day to day, and that taking that away from someone is actually really scary, right? Scarier than the fentanyl, right? And I just, that really struck me in the beginning. And I think you just kind of came full circle with that a bit. I would love to have you back on the podcast, honestly. So one of the things in how we connected in the first place is that Spectrum is opening our 4th peer recovery sports center. It's been a long road, but we have a space and a key, and we're going to be working on the build out in Lynn. And we've really been actively connecting with the community, and that's how we connected, with you. And I'd love to, especially as we get closer to the opening of the Lynn Support Center, we could probably do a whole other podcast when we started talking about, right, around kind of recovery coaching and peer support and all of that. And I'd love to have you back if you'd be open to that.
Yeah, sure.
That's awesome. But I really loved this conversation. I think it's perfect for what we're doing today and this month, right? Is celebrating recovery, so celebrating kind of all of those recovery pathways that can be different for everyone, right? That there's the pathways that involve medication, pathways that involve kind of formal treatment in residential, and pathways that involve things like Sahaja Yoga, right? That really can come together for each person. Anything that you want to say that I didn't ask that you want to make sure you get out there today?
Now you're going to put me on the spot.
And if there's nothing, that's cool too. I just want to give you some.
I'll probably think of it after we shut off, but I'm satisfied.
And one of the things we often will ask our guests, and it could be related to how to connect folks to Sahaja Yoga, but is there a resource, a recovery or wellness or anything that you tend to share with individuals that you would like to share now?
Yeah, sure. If people are interested in Sahaja Yoga, let's see, what's the best way? Sahaja Yoga. Oh God, I should have came prepared.
Okay.
SahajaYoga.us is one of our websites. That's our national website. And WeMeditate.com is also a Sahaja Yoga website that's done from our brothers and sisters over in Europe. And that's mostly some of the youth. Teaching meditation, which is amazing, by the way. If you meet anybody that was born meditating, you feel like you're talking to like this angelic, like glowing figure, that are like human, but definitely something going on there that is, amazing to me because I've never witnessed that before. So yeah, so definitely. And Sahaja Yoga is always free. We do have a center here in Massachusetts that is in Bedford. We meet every Friday at 7:00. Feel free to put my contact email out there or something if somebody's interested, and you can reach me. Michelle Simon, or what is my email? Michelle M. Simons01@northshore.edu. So Simons is SIMONS. Yeah.
Excellent. Yeah, we can put that information in the kind of show notes as well as the websites that you just talked a little bit about. This has been one of my favorite conversations. I've really appreciated kind of getting to know you through this. I look forward to connecting with you directly in Lynn as we, grow the recovery community out there and take part in the recovery community with the Peer Recovery Support Center. And I definitely think the closer we get to opening it, like, well, let's do another podcast, right, to spread that word.
Absolutely. I'm so excited for this. I'm very, very extremely grateful to Spectrum for, doing this and really like involving the recovery community. It's only a couple of us at the moment, but I'm starting to make announcements to all my little network meetings wherever I go here. So the city's getting, starting to energize it.
Excellent. Excellent. Yeah. All right. Well, thank you so much for joining us today. Thanks to everybody listening. If you liked this episode and others, please do the podcast thing, like, subscribe, come back again. We're really excited to have folks kind of listening to these messages. And I believe we have another episode next week with another recovery story. So, we're looking forward to connecting with everyone again. Thank you so much, Michelle. This has really been a gift.
Thank you for having me.
All right. Thanks so much.
Yep.
Bye.